Good evening to everybody who is listening to us, to everybody who is offline. Welcome to everyone. What should be the policy of taxation of tobacco? My name is Igor Kaidai. I'm the senior economist at the CES. I will be moderating this discussion and I will present a short overview of the current situation, the state of the Ukrainian tobacco market in terms of the taxation. This event is prepared with the assistance of Lviv Institute of Economic Research, and also Lviv is the partner, the Bloomberg Philanthropies in terms of tobacco usage.
English-speaking participants, you can turn on the English translation in the bottom bar of the Zoom.
I also call on you to keep the questions to speakers in Q&A or in chat. We'll try to get answers to all these questions or discuss them with the discussion participants. So what's important here, we are right now at the threshold of the consideration in the second reading, the draft law about the increase of tobacco excise. This was actually one of the requirements of the EU, the increase of excise taxes. This was put also in the MOU with IMF, and we undertook to complete that. So this event is very actual, but okay, not to waste our time, I suggest immediately to go to the presentation and to a short overview. So here on the first slide, you can see the picture that basically shows the status of the budget for 2023 without touching 2024, because it really has a very exemplary, like very good illustrative nature to show to all the participants of this discussion. At the moment, we have the war ongoing and it does require money. And irrespective of the growth of tax revenues, we can see that in 2023, especially in 2024, the revenues from taxes are growing. Nevertheless, the budget deficit is still increasing. So within 8 months of this year, we can see that the budget grew. Defense and other important items, security are 57%, 15% increase. I'm not talking about the taxes in the natural form. I'm talking only about the international assistance and the necessity to finance defense expenditures. It pushes the government to increase taxes. You know that it's still to be signed, the relevant draft law. If we go to the dynamics of this year, what we are seeing, we can see that the tax revenues of the state budget in September were 26% plus, while the excise taxes grew by 10 billion. And the main driver, it's the imported fuel and the imported tobacco. And because of these dynamics, the excises become a more significant share in the tax revenues and still more and more important. If we look at the way how excise taxes from tobacco are coming after the start of the full-scale invasion, the part in this accumulated budget, part of it goes to local budgets, and they started to grow quite sustainably. They considered 7.3%, and I believe this year it will be even more. It's important to mention that the nominal revenues from tobacco, they even run in front of the inflation for 2023, and the same picture looks for 2024, and the continued growth of excise revenues against the backdrop of low inflation and moderate economic growth. This may indicate that efforts to tackle the evasion of tobacco and fuel taxation So that brings certain results to get it out of shadow. But unfortunately, in my opinion, they are not sustainable. The pricing and the tax burden, we can see the graph of how the nominal price of the cigarette pack of medium level class, the last point on this graph, that's the freshest data, that's the beginning of November this year. We can see that this growth is quite linear, and we have some interesting aspects. So on average, the pack is 96 hryvnia, out of them excise is 50.3 hryvnia, and VAT will be 16 hryvnia. That means that 69% of the retail price, so all these indirect taxes, and it's very important that still in the beginning of the year, this share of indirect taxes was actually more than 77%. It actually went down from 77 to 69%, the share of taxes in the pack of cigarettes. So we can see that the producers of tobacco, they are increasing prices, and that also, of course, wholesale determines retail, which is not by 100% correlating with the excise. So basically, they are increasing irrespective of the excises. But in case we look at the price in euro of this pack, we can see that in reality, once again, it just reached slightly more than €2, taking into account devaluation, inflation. That's not a big growth. And let's see to a more long-term story. Basically, starting from 2017, they launched the 7-year plan of increasing excises. This was a very progressive decision at that time, which aimed to reach minimum European excises until 2025. And this plan led to the increase of excises. In the last years, they were actually higher than inflation. Then in real terms, the excises did grow. Here, I would want to mention that this dotted line, it's the expected dynamics for the upcoming years, taking into account the adoption of the draft law 1190. Well, I mean, it's not governmental, but that's the position of the Ministry of Finances, taking into account the forecasted indicators of inflation and taking into account that in case this draft law is adopted, then the excise taxes will be denominated in euro. So this dynamics takes into account that there will be some slight devaluation in euro, at least what is covered by inflation. This is one of the positive aspects in terms of the pricing policy, because this shall keep the revenues from excises from washing out because of the loss of the real value. So what is the structure of the market? That's the last slide before we go to the design of rates foreseen by the draft law. That's the approximate premium plus medium. It's almost half of the market, less than a third it's economy, and 20% it's twans. This is tobacco, which is used by heating up with some electric devices. This share is notably and sustainably growing. I think even nowadays it's slightly higher, but we don't have reliable evaluation. The last evaluation was it was 16 cigarettes, and as far as WHO, they believe 23% are smoking, 24.5%. The number of smokers did go down since before 2017, but these twins and electric cigarettes that actually turned around this trend. So it's important that starting from September 2024, the aromatized electronic cigarettes are prohibited, the aromatized liquids and roll-on tobacco is also prohibited. This was like a side effect of this norm. So let's look at the rates draft law 1190, which will be considered by the Committee from the Taxation Policy and Finances of the Verkhovna Rada. It will be brought to consideration once again. If we go back to the old 7-year-old plan, it envisaged reaching the minimum EU rates in 2025. It was the necessary directive of the European Union for excises, but it was based on the idea that the exchange rate in 2025 will be 33.5 hryvnia. So as a result of this devaluation, the old excise tax rate for 2025 is already less than 65 euro. But again, it's very important to remember that actually in 2017 we announced the course that we will reach European excise rates until 2025. So what does the draft law propose? What are its pluses and minuses? First of all, the plus is that the rates will be settled in euro, and in order to achieve the current EU rates in 2028, also it's important to take into account the European Union now has a very active discussion in terms of how it shall be reconsidered, the European Directive, and we can expect that until 2028, such countries will reach a certain consensus, and it's possible to wait for higher minimum excise rates for cigarettes and also the introduction of more regulation of other tobacco products which are spreading over in the EU. Also, this is not the effect of this draft law, but from the latest taxes, it's the introduction of excise tax for nicotine pillows. I've also seen this. This is the nicotine product, which was already coming to the view of the legislators. It's getting more and more popular. It has slower, slightly less rates to the identical consumption volumes, because for these nicotine tabs, because of the lack of breathing, there is this big consensus of medical workers that they are slightly less harmful for health. The only actual drawback of this bill 11090 is that it really breaks down the rate of excise tax for cigarettes and for twins, the ones that use this heating. Until now, these rates, they used to be quite in parity. It's important to keep mentioning that this excise for twins where the minimum excise is not applied, they have a very specific rate, and until now they were in parity, but this bill proposes a certain gap. I have put it into the frame. For the cigarettes we have quite a significant increase already denominated in euro for the excise tax rate for next year, and then the gradual closing to 90 euro in 2028, while for twins it's also some significant increase in 2025, and it will be a gap of 7.60 euro, and then the growth of the excise for these twins is slowing down. They will be adding, reaching only 72 euro in 2028. We will also talk in more detail around this discussion about this discrepancy. Our colleagues from the Vienna Institute of the International Economic Research were modeling in very detailed the influence if this bill is approved, what kind of influence this will be on the industry. I will show you two graphs. Maybe my colleague will stop a little bit more at this modeling. So the results show that these changes will preserve will be preserved at this level. The revenues of the tobacco industry already take into account inflation, so they don't need to have any harm to the industry, while the budget revenues will improve because of the increased excise tax. And it's very important, the side effect in our case, because the majority of countries of the developed world define their excise policy in the first place, guided by the assumptions how it will generally influence the budget long term, also through loss of productivity by the smokers because of their treatments. In our priority, we have some short-term revenues, but this effect will still be noticeable because the consumption of tobacco will be decreasing, although this will be noticeable because of the preferences for twins. And again, is this grounded, this preference for twins? There are actually two major arguments which I have run into why the excise tax rate should be lower. The first is from the budget point of view, taking into account that the smaller part of the counterfeit cigarettes are twins, they are much less on the market. So the ones who are advocating this position, they say that the lower excise for twins will push smokers of cigarettes move to twins and to start paying taxes where the smokers used to consume illegal cigarettes. But we have some simple mathematics which is not working because of some elasticity, so part of the smokers of cigarettes will come to twins, and it will not be that huge share, taking into account the size of rates and maybe a possible future difference in price. So there are so many assumptions that we have to take into account that really the companies will move this excise to the retail price. But until now, the policy of pricing doesn't give us the basis to expect that. But even if there is such a difference, irrespective of the fact how much will be this difference, moving to twins will be fully balanced by losing income from the smokers of the legal twins. But we still have more than 20% of the ones who already consume twins, and this share is growing. And for them, the revenues from excise will be less from them. And based on our evaluations, based on my calculation, taking into account the exchange rate of euro, which is very unlikely that it will change within 4 years, we expect the losses of budget revenues of 18-20 billion hryvnia due to lower excise duty on twin. So nominal losses can be even more. The other aspect is the negative influence on health by twins is probably less, but we will have panelists today who are more professional, who can talk a lot more using this topic, whether this is really supported with the evidence base. But the other negative part, more affordable twins will stimulate younger people to start smoking, also taking into account that these products are positioned very often for the young people to begin with. In terms of sales and the shadow sector, we see this ambivalent statistics of average daily products of tobacco through RRO. This is the data from the State Tax Service, and we can see that we have had a significant drop of average day sales. And starting from September 2020 there was some fall, but then if we look at the current picture, we have to give the reply to the question whether this graph is conditioned with this some success of fighting the shadow market, or is this seasonality? Because we have some available research that show that in the countries with the continental climate, where it's cold in winter, in case the smoking is forbidden in premises, like in restaurants, any other public places, then the consumption of cigarettes goes down in winter. To separate these factors is quite not easy. So we can see that this illegal tobacco is produced on a number of illegal sites, and we also have some signs that it is also produced also on licensed premises. Apart from that, we can see that the sales is taking place through large networks of kiosks. The struggle on the ground depends on the capacity of the local police, which is sometimes quite different from region to region, and that really affects the data of sales in various regions show different picture, which is very difficult to be explained. The other important channel of sales is online, including Telegram channels, and they have this coordination of some small wholesale, which is not systemic, but what our monitoring of these channels shows. That's all from my side. Many thanks for your attention. And I would like to invite you, Kristijan Fidanovski. He is the scientific fellow at the University of Oxford and the economist of the economic research. Kristijan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yuri, for the invitation and for the excellent overview of the topic. It is really a pleasure to be speaking to you tonight. Greetings from Vienna. You can already sort of feel the Christmas spirit in Austria. And it is a very important topic, of course, to be working on. We at the Vienna Institute have been engaging with this topic since the beginning of this year, since January. But this is an international collaboration that we are coordinating, currently spanning 7 Central and East European countries. Ukraine is, of course, one of the key points of focus in our work. And one part of our work on Ukraine has been the study that Yuri referenced already, which we conducted in the summer. So it was published in August this year, and it is available on our website. So the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies. It is available free of charge. And we modeled the scenario that is currently considered by the Ukrainian parliament, as well as one alternative scenario. So I was hoping to show you a few slides here tonight, just to explain to you how we did our analysis and to discuss some potential policy recommendations. So this is a study that, as I said earlier, I prepared together with my colleagues from the Vienna Institute. First, just to give a very broad overview of the model that we use. So this is the tobacco excise tax simulation model, TETSIM. It is a very commonly used model by the World Health Organization and other public health institutions. It is fairly straightforward. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it is available in Excel, and it is very easy to use, partly because it's very flexible for country-specific adjustments, and it is based on macroeconomic and market variables. So in our case, for this study, we used the following macroeconomic variables. We had the adult population in Ukraine, adult smoking prevalence, inflation, and GDP growth, relying on several national and international sources. Of course, Yuri already showed you some of these indicators. And then in terms of our market variables, we used sales volumes to estimate the tobacco market size. And then we divided the market segments along similar lines, I believe, to what Yuri showed in his presentation. But of course, this can differ a little bit based on the sources used. In our case, we collected them from the Ukrainian National Data Agency, as well as from Euromonitor International for 2023. And we arrived at a 32% market share for economy cigarettes. Then mid and premium brand cigarettes are consumed by almost half of the smoking population in the country. Heated tobacco products, as has already been discussed several times, in our estimates, 18.1% might be a little bit higher, but in any case, we're talking about a very large market share for heated tobacco products in Ukraine by global standards. Cigarillos were only represented with 3% and very small figure for roll your own products. For the price and tax rates, we used a fairly straightforward formula. So we incorporated the producer's price, the specific tax rate, the ad valorem tax rate, the general VAT rate, and the retailer's margin. And here are our model parameters. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, but based on the literature, we included for income elasticity of demand, we included 0.2 as a sort of a standard, relatively standard estimate from different countries in the academic and policy literature on tobacco. For price elasticity of demand, the range tends to vary between minus 0.2 and minus 0.6. So we decided to go with minus 0.4 for the economy brands. And then, of course, mid and premium brands tend to be less price sensitive. So for them, we went with minus 0.2. And for heated tobacco products, it was quite a challenge because, of course, these are still fairly novel products, not a lot of literature available on them. And the scarce literature that is available produces a lot of different estimates, but we used this minus 0.98 figure from a study on South Korea that has been published recently, but there are also some higher estimates available in the literature. And then in terms of tax pass-through, so of course, it's very challenging sometimes to estimate how the tobacco industry responds to tax increases. But most of the literature kind of concludes that for the economy brands, there is close to perfect or perfect pass-through. So the price goes up by the same amount by which the tax goes up. And then, of course, for the mid and premium brands, we generally see overshifting. So these are the products which are, again, less price sensitive. So usually the tobacco industry assumes that there are no big risks in this category. So even if the prices go up, most consumers will continue to smoke. And it's just a way for the tobacco industry to keep its profits constant or even increase them a little bit, even in the face of taxation reform. And in terms of the health parameters, we estimated, again, in line with the literature, and you can see at the bottom, if you're curious, some of the sources that we used. The assumption here was that when consumption goes down, half of that decline will be due to lower smoking prevalence, so people quitting cigarettes completely, whereas the other half will come from people who continue to smoke but will reduce their cigarette consumption, so will simply start smoking less. And then the kind of final health estimate is that 30% of the first 50% that I mentioned, so people quitting altogether, they will be saved from premature deaths as a result of this. So 30% of those people, or 15% of the overall smoking population. And with this in mind, we modeled two scenarios, as I mentioned in the beginning. The first one being the scenario that we have been, of course, already talking about a lot today, the one proposed by the Ministry of Finance in March 2024. This one, in our view, contains a fairly modest increase in excise taxes. So in this model, they will only go to 90 euros per 1,000 cigarettes by 2028, in line with the European Tobacco Tax Directive. So it will take a couple of years before this benchmark is reached. And importantly, this scenario includes a 20% tax advantage for heated tobacco products. So in their case, by 2028, the excise tax will only go up by 72 euros per 1,000 HTP sticks. And then in the second scenario, we modeled an alternative proposal, one of several, as far as we are aware, alternative proposals that have been submitted to the Ukrainian parliament, this one in April 2024, which proposes larger increases in excise taxes. So by 2028, the tax would go up to 120 euros per 1,000 cigarettes. And in this scenario, we have no tax advantage for heated tobacco products. So they're treated the same as traditional cigarettes, meaning that for them also the tax will reach 120 euros per 1,000 HTP sticks by 2028. And expectedly, we are getting rather different results, both in terms of fiscal implications and health implications under these two scenarios. So all the values here are expressed in million Ukrainian hryvnia in real terms. And as you can see here, until 2025, the two scenarios go hand in hand, and then we start seeing a divergence with of course, scenario 2 resulting in larger total tax revenue, both in terms of the total tax as well as the excise tax. In terms of smoking prevalence, similar situation until 2025, the trends are the same. And then we see the trend plateauing and in fact, even increasing a little bit in the first scenario with cigarettes becoming more affordable. And then in scenario 2, the decline in smoking prevalence continues all the way to 2028. And a similar trend can be observed for smoking intensity as well in the top right-hand corner. So for tobacco products per smoker, not just for the overall smoking prevalence. And in terms of premature deaths averted, this is a cumulative estimate, so all the way again to our final year in the sample 2028. The assumption is that in the first scenario, the currently discussed scenario in Ukraine, 65,000 smokers will be saved from premature death, whereas in the second scenario, the number more than doubles to 164,000 premature deaths avoided. So as a conclusion, raising tobacco taxes under our two modeled scenarios carries major fiscal benefits, an increase in the total fiscal revenue from between 39.3% to 68.9% based on the scenario, as well as health benefits, which we saw just earlier on the slide. It is important, however, to acknowledge several limitations stemming from our methodology and data sources. The TETSI model is perhaps less perfect, so to speak, on the health side, in the sense that health gains are estimated as sort of occurring immediately, so no lags are included in the model. And then macroeconomic variables, of course, are very difficult to estimate in the case of Ukraine, given the military conflict context. As we saw in recent years, at a more global level, there have been many rather abrupt disruptions to the macroeconomic environment. The economy, of course, seems to be stabilizing at the moment, but if such developments occur in the future, we've seen now how easy it is for some of the expected fiscal and health gains to be eroded because of the immediate increases in cigarette affordability in these situations. And finally, as I mentioned also when I was discussing our elasticity estimates, there is very limited past literature available on the demand of heated tobacco products and their elasticity, which can be particularly challenging as it can really impact the results a lot in a country with a high market share of heated tobacco products, such as Ukraine.
Дякую, Крістіане.
Thank you so much, Kristijan, for the presentation. We can see that one of the significant problems of modeling the Ukrainian market, apart from the traditional that we have several years that we have less public data, but the problem is also that we have quite a high share, which is not really natural, the usage of these heated products. So we don't really have that many elements of the research that could really show us elasticity. Kristijan is one of the few who says that this scenario, which is put in the draft law that will be considered, it is about the excise tax increase. This could be bigger, and it could prevent the growth of consumption and could save many more lives of Ukrainians. The only question in this discussion to Kristijan, in your opinion, whether there could be a different cross elasticity by substituting cigarettes with heated products for the ones who are smoking legal cigarettes and the ones who are smoking the illegal counterfeit products, that could be slightly less. Is it possible to make some well-grounded assumptions that this pace of replacement will be different for these categories or not?
So if I understood the question correctly, it mainly deals with illicit trade. And of course, illicit trade is a problem in Ukraine, even though in our experience, at least it has been quite difficult to obtain credible estimates. But then the literature more broadly is showing us that illicit tobacco sales are mainly driven by changes in the enforcement of existing laws, of course, on tackling and curbing illicit trade rather than changes in taxation and prices. So personally, I wouldn't...
Kristijan, here I will just interrupt and clarify my question in English. Would you expect a different substitution rate in case there will be tax preference for HTPs? That those who currently consume illegal tobacco, which we would expect is a bit cheaper, compared to those who consume legal cigarettes. Can we expect different elasticities here?
Well, it would be difficult to speculate based on the existing literature, because of course, as I said earlier, the entire research agenda on heated tobacco products is still very nascent. Generally, we know that HTP products cost more than any of the traditional cigarette products that we modeled in our scenario. So, of course, but they're also consumed more by generally younger smokers, which tend to be more price sensitive, which of course makes our job as researchers even more difficult, because these trends can move in many different directions.
Yeah, Kristijan, thanks a lot for your input and for presenting the presentation. The modeling of the impact of possible scenarios.
And now I would like to pass the floor to Ilya Neshodovsky, who is together with us. He is the chief of the analytical direction of the Network of Protection of National Interests, and also the some consultant for some committees of the Verkhovna Rada. Ilya, I want to ask about slightly a different choice. We talked about the excises, but there are some other options how you can get more revenues into the budget, which are necessary to finance the defense. From your point of view, from the analytics that you are preparing, in your opinion, which taxes are less harmful for the economy? Should this be an argument in terms of the excise policy? Many thanks for the question. Yeah, really, I would first talk what should be the policy of taxation of tobacco in Ukraine, and also discuss it in the context where we are. If we are at the state of war, and Ukraine definitely needs the increase of revenues, we have to understand that our international partners are financing exclusively non-military budget, while the military budget should be provided directly by us. And such way of providing for it at the expense of taxes. You know that on the 15th of October, they adopted the draft law about the increase of taxes. It's not yet signed, but nevertheless, it's exactly This increase goes about the increase of taxes because there are some commitments before IMF in terms of the increase of the tax revenues. And basically, such approach is quite understandable because we have to look into the future, and the International Monetary Fund says that there will not be endlessly the story about the support of our budget by our international partners. So we have to take into account some internal revenues and the revenues at the expense of taxes. And in this particular case, it's important to define in which way we can increase taxes in such a way so that our economy continued to be competitive in the conditions in which it is now. The draft law that was brought to the Verkhovna Rada, already voted but not yet signed, envisages the increase of taxation of salaries. We know that they want to increase from 1.5 to 5% of military levy. And if we talk sincerely, maybe our audience will be the name of the military levy will not disorient. That's increasing the taxes from natural persons, so it's more taxes from citizens, which actually decreases their buying capacity, and that shall negatively affect our economy. So the volumes of product sales can be decreased because of the decreased demand in consumption. There is also the inflation index that negatively affects the demand of consumers. The other thing that they propose is increasing taxes for private entrepreneurs, to say that this is like the biggest, the most well-to-do part of the population. No, we can't say that, but theoretically, for some groups, like for instance, for group 3, basically this will mean that they will pay not 5, but 6% of taxes. That's quite acceptable. It's not critical, apart from several industries, but even for them, it's not even critical, like trade or something like that. And the question about the increase of taxes for banks, it's a separate story, taking into account that the banks have received the record profit for 2023, 2024. So such increase, irrespective of the fact that it does contradict the principles of taxation and introduced retroactively, taking into account the conditions, extraordinary conditions where we are. So this is basically possible. And in this particular issue, what is less harmful? Have they chosen the optimal way? The Ukraine budget should go having taxation of the Ukrainian business. And in this context, definitely not. On the first place, we have the fight with various shadow schemes. That is, if you are increasing taxes but not strengthening the control to pay taxes, then the volume of the shadow economy will grow. That is, in this particular case, we see, and analyzing that level of the shadow economy, of these excise taxes, like excise products like petrol, tobacco, and some other spheres, the problems with the customs, then in this context it's a huge challenge. And I wanted to mention that Minfin should show at least some specific steps that allow to fight this in this sphere. And this should be on place 1. Such measures should be foreseen, but they are not. We also saw some statistics in terms of the shadow sector of tobacco, the capacity of the state that it showed starting from March and April this year really showed good results until September of this year by 10%. Wow. This was the decrease of the shadow market. So the problem, let me draw your attention, is not in the size of the excise tax. The problem exactly is in the capacity of the state and the wish of the state to fight the shadow sector. When there is no wish, when the law enforcement and the taxation bodies are closing, then the share during the war of the illegal market grew by 27% of illegal tobacco. That's a catastrophe. Around 30 billion for 2023, we did not get to the state budget because of that. And the question is to the state, what are you going to do now in order to increase the revenues in this particular case? Next, after fighting with this shadow market, we are coming to the classic economy, to the very specific influence of taxation onto the economic activity. And in the first place, we actually have the excise. That's the taxation of harmful habits of our citizens, and taxation that also something that is polluting the environment, that is petrol. So I would also like to draw your attention that the logic of the state in taxation of petrol is not very consequential, because when they're canceling the excise in the beginning of the war and then they're increasing it, that's already the responsibility of the state, unfortunately. But I believe the approach not to make taxes of the petrol in the beginning of the full-scale invasion. I don't just know why this was done. To me, it still remains open. But still, we are coming directly to the excises, to tobacco. And in this particular case, it's absolutely not clear, like during making a decision, to provide in this context the benefit and under-receive billions of hryvnia to the state budget. To explain this by the state, by the Ministry of Finance, is not possible. Minfin has, in the first place, to look at the potential of increasing revenues and has to see where there we have a significant positive factors. This could be the increase of revenues, this could be the potential decrease of the number of smokers. And those remarks that say that the increase of excises leads to the increase of shadow, actually 24 showed that non-increase of excises leads to the increase of the shadow economy, namely the incapability of the state to fight shadow schemes. So in this particular case, we have to emphasize this. Next, we found some compromise between the analytical center, and this is one other indirect tax, the VAT, which actually levels out the size of taxation for everybody, and that's the correct approach in terms of the size of the taxation. And from my side, taking into account that the Ukrainian business is in much worse conditions versus the international business, I would increase taxes on imported goods, especially illegal supply of goods. It can't be the case that the Ukrainian goods will be taxed more than the goods that are, or at least sometimes not taxed at all, that are coming from abroad. These are the main aspects and the main conclusion which I wanted to make from my report. In the first place, the state has to fight with the shadow sector by increasing the capacity of the state, namely by courts, by law enforcement, to fight shadow market. Number two, the increase of taxes from the ones which are less harmful for the economy, and then only come to direct taxes such as taxation of incomes of citizens. And that could be the solution, which could now, during the war, would have the minimum negative effect onto the economic development and on the execution of our commitments before our army. Thank you so much, Mr. Ilya, for your performance. I would fully agree that 23-24 clearly show that at the backdrop of increasing excises, we can see the growth of real revenues. In the same way, we see that we are not in the situation when law enforcement and the government simply are running to a moment where they simply don't understand the sources of these illegal goods. So, but these are very evident channels. We have even seen examples when law enforcement would stop their operation for several months. This was immediately shown on online sales channels where lots of positions would disappear. So it does work, but it works not in a sustainable manner. Then the situation rolls back, and therefore this shadowification of the market is still, it depends in the first place on the capacity of the law enforcement, very basic, that can be achieved. They don't need to build like institutions. It's about political will mostly, and this should not be the main factor. So we can set lower excises, and this logic is kept for cigarettes. We also have a question to heated products. I would like to pass the floor now. I have seen the raised hand of Andriy Skipansky. He is representing WHO in Ukraine. Andriy, the floor is yours. Actually, I had some clarifying question in case you have a very strong agenda and wait and make performance when you give the floor to me. Andriy, thank you. In case Kristijan is still with us, you can ask a question. I would like to thank to all the previous speakers for this really deep discussion, very informative, and it covers almost all aspects of the policy in the sphere of control over the tobacco, and really touches significantly all the issues connected with the taxation of tobacco and heated products. So we sort it out now, and thank you for this experience. To thank Kristijan for the very good presentation and the way you connected taxation to health. It's very difficult to do because you need to really use certain models, and there will be always questions to the relevance of these models, but thank you for your really great work. What I'm concerned is that we are repeating, that doesn't pertain to Kristijan because he gave a very objective reply, but we seem to repeat the arguments that appeared within Minfin, and they're unique in their experience, that supposedly decrease of the taxation of heated products will move will make people move from regular products to heated products. I don't think this is evidence-based. The consumers of illegal cigarettes, it's a special category which we don't really know well. And they would always wish to have some really cheap illegal cigarettes. That is, the price is most important. So the because this heated products is a more expensive segment, so I don't think there is any potential for decreasing the price. So I would say that I'm quite concerned that we are repeating the rhetorics which in reality didn't exist in the economic categories of the increasing, making heated products more accessible, that it would in any case guarantee the fight with counterfeited goods. This is like really new. I have heard it only in Ukraine. Thank you for this reply. I would tend to agree, but since these arguments were voiced, I believe it's necessary to address them, even if we miss that it will really take place. Just the mathematical effect of tax revenues would be really zero in this part of this elasticity, but we would have losses from the ones who are using heated products legally. So thank you for your remark. I will pass the floor later, and now I would like to pass the floor to our other online panelist. That's Hanna Ross. She is the senior economist of the Vienna Institute of International Economic Research. And as far as I understand, Hanna also plans to touch base on some different argumentation from the supporters of the preferential usage of heated products. Hanna, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Yuri, and greetings to everybody participating in this webinar and discussions. I think it's very good and lively that we talk about all these issues. I was answering some of the questions already online. So when you see answer from Jakub, it's actually not Jakub, it's me, because Jakub couldn't participate and I used his link. And I was the one with working with Kristijan on that study. And I just want to comment on few things on related to differentiated rate of between cigarettes and HTP. It is my understanding that the IMF currently issued a report where it recommends to Ukraine to have a lower rate for HTP, the main reason being harm reduction. So two things about this. First of all, harm reduction hasn't been proven yet. We have some idea that's possible, but not a final conclusion about this because we just don't have enough data. It took research 50 years to study the impact of cigarettes on human health. We don't have the data for HTPs or any e-cigarettes, so we don't have a conclusion about that. And since we do not have a conclusion about the harm that these products represents lower harm, the recommendation from World Health Organization is to tax these products equally as cigarettes. We have recently done study in North Macedonia. There is not a lot of data around substitution between HTPs and cigarettes. In North Macedonia, we see very clearly that HTPs are not promoting a substitution from all the smokers who already smoke cigarettes towards HTP. What we see in North Macedonia that the HTPs are almost primarily consumed by young generation, young people. So there's we don't see any substitution from those who smoke cigarettes towards HTP. If that, very little, and a lot of people who make the attempt to switch to HTP then go back to cigarettes. So the main reason why we want to tax HTPs on the same level as cigarettes is that we want to prevent young people from picking up in this huge, in this increasing speed as we see elsewhere, picking up these products. And as you also, Andrei pointed out, these products are more expensive than cigarettes. So it wouldn't make sense for cigarette users to switch to HTPs. It's for young people, those who are attracted to new products, and also if we won't tax HTPs the same as cigarettes, the profit margin will be even higher on these products. We already currently know that profit margin on HTPs is substantially larger than on cigarettes. This is a money-making product for tobacco industry. So just in a matter of fairness, those products should be taxed the same as cigarettes for, as I said, multiple reasons. We don't know about substitution. It is to prevent young people picking up these products, starting to initiate with these products, and also the matter of fairness because they really attract the high profit margins. So that's the pitch to you. That's my story from my experience and the research. Thank you very much.
Hanna, thank you a lot for such a lively intervention and for covering a lot of issues and providing arguments.
Our next speaker will be Dmytro Kupera, the executive director of NGO LIFE. He is the fighter of the anti-tobacco market. Dmytro, the floor is yours. Thank you, Yuri. Even without a question, I will tell you the following. First of all, thank you for the possibility. Thank you for putting us together under this discussion, because it's really very important. And, because of the sustainable growth of Ukraine, especially in the conditions of the big war and in the condition of the demographic catastrophe, and in the conditions that we would not become the country, the demographic garlic country, because there is the risk that on such a huge territory of Ukraine, we will have very, very few people. And it would seem that is this really tobacco a big threat? Exactly, a huge, big threat. We every year more than 100,000 people are dying. This figure is fluctuating because we don't know how many people we have on the controlled territory, on the occupied territory of Ukraine. That's why definitely this data is, let's put it this way, they are, need to be calculated, but these figures are really impressive. And knowing that tobacco killed the majority, the biggest number of people, much more than the first epidemic of this, or even the Second World War. So definitely, it looks like the tobacco industry is really betting on countries that are developing. Unfortunately, Ukraine is part of that because the instruments of tobacco interventions for the sales of tobacco products are working very effectively for the countries which are developing. If possible, I would give you some materials that would be easier for me. I would put up on the screen. First of all, this is some calculation data. This is the structure of the data for the pack of cigarettes and for the heated products. On the left, it's the structure of these heated products. On the right is normal cigarette, medium class. And in the center, we have the structure of the heated products pack in case the excise will be kept at the cigarette level, which is 90 euro. So we have taken the price of the pack that will cost 135 hryvnia. This is the price that we expect of the pack of cigarettes of medium class when the excise reaches the level of 90 euro. So under this plan, as it is now, the Minfin proposes, so this will take place not earlier than 2028. And as you see, basically in connection with the fact that approximately by 16 hryvnia there will be a difference in the excise, the heated products will have by 16 hryvnia will have a bigger share which is not taxed. To expect that this hypothesis that they will make a lower price of the tobacco industry. No, this has not been the case in previous years. When this excise was 3.5 times less than the excise for cigarettes, somehow they still put in the maximum margin in each pack of cigarettes. So we do have the basis to believe that this is in essence is a preference. So we can't call it anything else but the preference, that the difference in excise for the heated products and for cigarettes. That's why let us draw this visualization of the part which is a preference, and I don't think it's proper to make such a preference for the tobacco industry that will cost the under arrival into the budget, and it will cost lives and health of Ukrainians. Can we go to the next slide? Here, the first thing which is very pleasant for me, that we coincide with Yuri from the figures which we have received from the Treasury about revenues from excises for tobacco goods. And what I would like to say, this is in the context of revenues and the risks of illegal trade. As you can see, from 2013, basically for 10 years, the only drop was in 2022 when the big war started, when physically they stopped the companies. They were not buying excise, but already next year we could see that if we would make it average, there would be no drop, because 80 billion was from next year. So I'm talking that it is important to fight illegal trade. It's important to ratify the protocol on liquidation of illegal trade by tobacco. But now Ukraine is so effective in increasing excise taxes for tobacco. So irrespective of the policy on illegal trade, and of course this information should be very carefully dealt with, because the excise taxes are growing, excise revenues are growing. The other thing which I want to say, Ukraine is an international example of harmonizing excises for tobacco products for heating to the level of cigarettes, because when this happened, and it's important to give credit to Danylo that this arrival to budget grew by 6 times just within 1 year, from 1.7 billion to 10.2 billion hryvnia. Unfortunately, the last thing which I want to say regarding this slide, we have the data already for 2024, for 9 months, that the excise revenues from tobacco goods, they outperform the results of 2023. So the dynamics is very positive. Can we go to the next slide? And the next one, please. Why the increase of taxes for the tobacco products? It's very important because the dynamics is, we could present the results of the Kyiv Institute of Sociology that did in July, that show how the dynamics of consumption of tobacco products is changing among the population. And that's why we have good news. We have the dynamics to decrease the consumption among the population in general. It went down from 37 to 23%. But this is the dynamics as a statistical error, but it does demonstrate the tendency, and the tendency is, thanks God, positive. Once again, if we look at the structure of consumption of the youngest age group, 18-29 years, we can see the growth of consumption of tobacco products for heated products among the ones who are smoking any tobacco products. Among them, it grew from 37 to 45%. On the one hand, it says that the young people are moving from other types of, most likely cigarettes, to heated products. And secondly, it gives the assumption to do what it does in terms of the products of which young people are starting and become smokers, dependent on the consumption of tobacco. I would also like to attract your attention to the upper part of this graph. I wanted to ask the sociologists, if we take all the consumers, all this, the ones who are using any tobacco products, it turned out that up to 70%, that's the usage of cigarettes, up to 23%, that's the usage of tobacco products for heating. And in addition to that, I would like to say, we didn't ask this gray graph. It's at the same time, these heated products, it comes out that only 6% of the whole population are smoking. I think this will be shocking for all our viewers and listeners, because the electronic cigarettes among our adult population, it's only 4% of the population does that. No, of course, this is really a small figure for the whole population, but this 16% from the adult population who are using tobacco products, they are actually within young people. This is another product which is the hook for engaging the next generation, who will be, by the end of their life, will not be able to say no to tobacco. Actually, less than 10% are able to quit. And we can see that this is just one more hook to engage young people. So it's so important to keep the harmonized increase. And in terms of the electronic cigarettes, it's my subjective opinion. We should regulate them instead of banning them. They act like as children's cigarettes. And based on the, so we have some 20% of children of 13, 15 years, they smoke e-cigarettes. So e-cigarettes have to be fully banned and to control that, and the heated products to keep it at the same level as excises with cigarettes. Thank you. Thank you, Dmytro. We will start now the medical part of the panel. I think I had very correct expectations. It shows a very good dynamic. So we definitely need to take into account that part of the consumers can do both. It's important to define what is in the first place. But once again, coming to this medical part of our panel, which is very interesting for me because there are a lot of speculations, discussions, especially during the policy dialogue when we do this discussion of the policy of the excises, which is grounded, which is not, from the point of view of health of people. For me, as the economist who doesn't have any medical education, but somehow is interested in behavior of people, because economy is about the behavior of people, it's very clear that same electronic cigarettes and other heated products, they are more unsafe because of the spread of consumption, because they are more accessible. In many situations, you won't be able to smoke cigarettes, but you will be able to consume twains or e-cigarettes, who is refraining from but doing others. Of course, you will not put around this like a different dopamine mechanism that foresees some slower ritual, or like, for instance, when you consume tobacco through this pipe, which is not spread at all. So the more it is accessible, the quicker you can do this. I would really like that, apart from our main topics, the colleagues who have some specialized medical education and specialization, so they would also reflect on this topic. And the first I would like to give to Taras Hutor. He is the head of the Department of Economy and Health Protection of the Lviv National University, Danylo University. Taras, the floor is yours. Dear colleagues, many thanks. Now we can hear you. Many thanks, and thank you for getting me to be part of this important discussion. I wanted to concentrate on two. It's also about the results of the research that we have done. And in the first place, we will talk that jointly with the NGO Life, we have received the methodology research for the third-year students in terms of the new cigarettes. We have developed the course, which was composed of one lecture, and the topic was how the social problems are connected with the consumption of new tobacco products. Then the sociological research in terms of the level of consumption and using this newest tobacco products, as well as the factors of risk on how the illnesses are taking place. We also talked about the anti-tobacco legislation, and we also looked at the life expectancy, also the problems connected with misuse of cigarettes and vape products. We also talked about the principles of taxation of tobacco products, and we also tried to understand how the price is formed. It is the VAT, excise, the special tax, it's the customs fee, it's the earnings of the company, what are the components, and how does the state regulate all of that. We have looked at the question in terms of fighting smoking. How can smokers take care of their health and how non-smokers can take care of their health in case somebody is smoking in their circle. And the most important of these classes was that we proposed the medical students to calculate risks that we see in smoking these newest tobacco products, the risks on health. We took this from various sources, this data, and there were some extracts of articles where it was where we have seen this various. So the students could have the possibility to calculate how they see it, these risks. So what was preceding to this course, and basically how we were researching the effectiveness, we had the working group, whether there was a working question whether the medical students are sure that these newest products are in the same way harmful as the classical products. But I understand in the future, these medical students will work with patients and will convince them not to smoke, and by all means fight against tobacco consumption. So for a start, we had several questions, and some of them I would like to comment. This was what was mentioned by Andriy Skiparsky, whether twains and electronic cigarettes, they are alternatives for quitting smoking. This percentage is quite small. So we can see that the percentage is really small. And also from the general questions, we don't see any safe smoking. So please tell me whether you would agree with this topic. So in terms of the survey, we had 75%. So we see that the percentage is quite low. After this training, which ended just last week, this percentage was 86%. We see these things as we asked, how is the smoking of electronic cigarettes or tobacco containing goods with heating, would it carry lower risks for the health? And this was quite not a good picture. So we saw, we believe that such risks are much lower. After this training was conducted, it went down by 2 percentage points. So the figure is 55%. This is exactly that no student doesn't smoke and never smoked. If we say about who is smoking now, the figures are very similar to what has been mentioned by Dmytro. We have some 30% say that they use one or the other type of tobacco products, and 15% say that they used to smoke and now they don't use any tobacco. So if we're talking about the prevalence of smoking, it's like this. And what was how many what is the percentage of smoking in your circle? And they say like 49%. We also asked which money you use on average for the procurement of these cigarettes. So on average, people spend 231 hryvnia per week on tobacco products. Colleagues, thank you for the attention. Many thanks, Taras. And I would like now to invite to the floor Andriy Skiparsky once again. He's the representative of WHO. Andriy, please, the floor is yours. Once again, good evening, colleagues. Thank you again for this really meaningful discussion. And as far as I understand, our main objective is, at least in this audience, to come up to some common vision in terms of the taxation policy in Ukraine. So evidently, from what I'm hearing, we can see the overwhelming majority of people who think alike, with the several cost fluctuations in terms of the technical details. But what I've heard today, these are the topics that basically in Ukraine they are promoted for more than 10 years. and where Ukraine's government has decided to do this back in 2012, 2013, when they started this first 7-year plans for taxation of tobacco products and nicotine products. We are now collecting some ripe fruits from that very important decision at that time. But from my side, to the requests that existed before our WHO organization, in terms of taxation of the taxation of tobacco products by the committee. So we have submitted our vision to the committee, and I can just repeat what has already been said and mentioned by colleagues and partners. First of all, the 8th report of the research group of the WHO in the issues of regulation of tobacco products calls all stakeholders and the countries who signed this framework agreement, this framework convention on fighting tobacco, to ban all the producers to make any claims about less harm of heated products compared to other products, or to present heated products as the way to slowly decrease the consumption, also to forbid it, the usage in the public places, in case we don't have any other evidence. In Ukraine, this was done and is being done, and as Dmytro said, Ukraine really tried to stick to some great standards, was mentioned numerously in various reports as one of the best policies in terms of the taxation, and using equal rates of excise taxes and equal approaches to taxation of cigarettes and heated products. But unfortunately, we say that this policy may change and the rates will be differentiated. It's a shame to hear that this idea is coming from the government, because we all here mentioned numerously where can we take the money. It's very important that these options were prepared, and so it looks very cynical, the increase of taxes of various groups of population, at the same time the entrepreneurial activity, at the same time decreasing the level of taxation for tobacco products. I mean, decreasing the dynamics of taxation, and trying to explain this with their fight of counterfeited products. So all previous works, and most importantly, the conference of all the convention, they said that heated products should be taxed at the same rate as cigarettes. There is no evidence to prove that heated products are less harmful. Absolutely, we don't have that. It's a very important remark, because very often we are hearing that these heated products are less harmful. I was also trying to look at all possible research that we have there. At the moment, we don't have any reliable research that they are definitely significantly less harmful. No medical worker, no professional that really respects themselves would not mention that. And also we should avoid making assumptions that the heated products are less harmful. There should not be any declarations that heated products are less harmful. That's why I would like to emphasize that the decrease of prices will make some products more accessible, so lowering prices can lead to some lost future profit in terms of the revenues to the state budget. And most importantly, this has nothing to do with fighting the illegal market or counterfeit products, using the administrative measures and the measures that we have within the state in terms of the fight of counterfeit products. We can decrease this shameful phenomenon in a very short-term period, but not taking a good proper care, this can lead to some catastrophe. We have seen it within 15-20 years recently. Once we talk about the increase of taxes, then they have a lot of new data that supposedly they're trying to fight the illegal trade. These are absolutely different from the fiscal measures that the state has available, such as taxation. So taxation and fighting illegal trade, illegal production, it's absolutely different things. So I would like to thank you for the participation and for the fruitful relationship. Many thanks to you, Andriy. I can see that we have been joined by Jakub Katetik. He's the senior economist of the World Bank. He was a little bit delayed because of his meetings with the Ukrainian side that were interrupted because of the air alert. So I would like to give him the floor to Jakub.
Given that you have extensive research and analytical capabilities in the World Bank, what is your current stance and opinion on the draft law parameters which we are discussing? In particular, the excise rates, target excise rates for cigarettes, but also for the HTPs and the differentiation which may be introduced. There is like a lot of pushback, especially from the market participants, with the arguments that in Europe the excise rates for HTPs are really less relative to cigarettes if we compare to what the situation in Ukraine is or will be. My less informed position is that this is primarily due to HTPs being insignificant share of the market in most of the Western and European countries yet, especially compared to Ukraine. But I would very much like to hear what's your opinion.
Thank you, Yuri. Thank you, colleagues, and my apologies for coming in late. I think it's really very difficult to add anything new to the discussion. I think all the main points have been already made. I think Ukraine, up until quite recently, has really been considered a really great example globally in terms of increasing taxes on tobacco products and long-term planning on aligning taxation regime with its aspiration to join the European Union with the EU Directive. And I think the current proposals are unfortunately a bit worrying, and I'm speaking with my kind of health economist hat, because they seem to break away with this tradition. I think especially worrying is not just the delay in reaching the 90 euros, which we hope will in the EU be more than 90 euros soon, but nothing is certain. But this issue of differentiation, and I think colleagues here have provided really great points of why this is a terrible idea. The fact that it doesn't really, first of all, it's the fiscal impact. The second one is that there's absolutely no global evidence that shows that HTPs in any way are less harmful. I think Dmytro Kupera has shown us, and this is really scary, that HTPs and electronic cigarettes are the cigarettes of tomorrow. That these are the products that are being consumed by young people who are young now, but also those are the people who will be, unfortunately, I think in large percentage, lifelong smokers, right? So I think those are the products that then will be with us for decades to come. So taxing them at a lower rate now, I think encourages, in fact, uptake of those products. in a way, I don't think we have a lot of empirical data on this, but I think logically it makes sense. And it's basically setting up for huge problems in the future. I think it was really great, the colleagues that have talked about shadow economy, and Andrew, you spoke very well about this, the fact that first, this is a separate issue, I think, and it's a broader issue of tax compliance. This is not something that's related just to tobacco. I think it's also great to see that in previous instances when excise taxes rates were increased, we didn't really see any massive increases in illegal tobacco consumption. So I think this is really it. I think we are grateful for the collaboration with colleagues from WiiW on the study that Kristijan has just presented again, which has shown the fiscal impact of both policy proposals, but I think also showing the health impact, right? The fact that with lower tax rates, tobacco consumption will not go down as quickly as we would like it to go, and they will have important health consequences. And one point perhaps to also bring up, and this will going to be my last, it's that this is not just the health impact, right? I think we really are talking about productivity of Ukrainians. We're really talking about the potential of people to contribute to the economy, about human capital of Ukraine. So those are short-term fiscal decisions, but those are also long-term productivity and economic growth decisions. So I'll stop here.
Jakub, thank you. Thank you for your input. And the last one of the panelists today is, перепрошую, там бачите, не примкнув у голові. Останньою на сьогодні панелісткою.
So the last panelist online will be Marina Shevchenko. She is a PhD medicine of the National Kyiv-Mohyla University. Marina, please. Just recently, Jakub has put on the hat of the Economist to comment. You, please, from the hat of the Doctor of Medical Sciences, what is your vision towards the main discussion points from the point of view of the medical argumentation? Colleagues, good evening. Many thanks for this very interesting discussion and for very interesting performances in the presentations. Certainly, I'm very much concerned by the question that exactly being considered from the point of view of the taxation of heated products, the preferences to these heated products. I was present at the two working groups exactly to discuss the draft law which is to be adopted in the second reading 11090. So we see that according to the proposal from the government, we seem to have preferences for heated products, although Dmitro and myself emphasize that these heated products, it's HTPs, it's a problem, and it's the main consumption, it's among young people, and you can't decrease the excises, especially because we have a very good practice, and Ukraine, in terms of the levels of taxation of cigarettes and HTPs, did have good results and good experience, and we are now coming back, and we have quite a negative tendency when we have some preferences, which is based only on the growth of the shadow market. Very unfortunate that just very last working group was basically the main emphasis was made by the majority of the representatives were made exactly on growth of the shadow market rather than deterioration of the health for the population. And once again, we said that it's not such a big harm but we did emphasize that really these HTPs, of course, we don't have the evidence base yet. We still have a lot of research in progress, including some systematic overviews and topical research, but still at the moment we don't have that much of the evidence. Actually, more and more scientific publications state that usage of HTPs in the future will lead to moving to smoking cigarettes. And as our colleague from the World Bank said, this is a very long-term usage that will lead to significant losses, not only in terms of deterioration of health, but also to some significant economic losses connected with the losing of working time, and that could lead to deterioration of the economy, which is so much important for us. So that is of great concern to me, because this preference, and that during our last meeting, during our last working group, they said that there are recommendations of the International Monetary Fund, and the International Monetary Fund supports such preferences for HTPs, and of course representatives of producers and representatives of trading networks. They're very much interested in this document because for them it's an argument. For us, it is a much worse in terms of preserving the health of population. So I really hope that tomorrow maybe the common sense will win, and we will stay on the positions, and we will preserve this proper proportion without preferences. So we will want that the results of our meeting would be brought to the knowledge of the representatives of the committee, to the chairperson of this committee. But we recommend not to decrease the excise to twins, because this can lead to some negative consequences for health and in general for the economy. Many thanks for this comment, because I'm concentrating on the consequences for the budget, but the health is also very important. And thank you for reminding us about the link to the IMF. Let me talk in a most politically correct way. The position of IMF is mentioned in quite some communications. Take into account the minimum rates, they can see the possible excise between 45 to 90 euro, and in this particular range it should be based on the balance of the budget expectations, and also some assumptions of health. They understand that there is no high quality evidence base for the lower harm, and also they're quite adding that in case of the budget needs, this excise could be higher, once again in the same framework of 95, 100 euro, and they never insisted on approving some laws. So the general logic where we're working with IMF and the rest of the states who are working with IMF is very similar. That's the creditor that is interested in improving the fiscal stability of the countries. That requires certain reforms, but the design of these rates, especially, it gives some preferences in tax. This is not something that IMF is expecting. I'm talking this as a senior economist of CES who reads a lot of their documents. I can also see, I have seen for a long time a raised hand of Dmytro Mikhalenko. Yes, Mr. Dmitry, maybe I can also give the floor to you. Yes, I have a question mostly to the economic and taxation block of this discussion, because for many years I'm part of working with some public civil working groups in the parliament, and I wouldn't agree to everything, not to all the proposals that they're being and implemented into life, but I do have such an experience that whatever Ukraine was doing as part of the first test sample, then we had was not good. Like the last example, this controlled foreign companies, where we actually were too fast of introducing this control foreign companies. I'm not talking from the medical point of view, I'm talking from the point of view of the execution of budget fiscal policy in such a way. And my question to economists is the following. Now we have some international experience that in general in the world HTP is less than cigarette excise by 53%. There are differentiated rates, like in Great Britain is 77%, in Malaysia 41%. In Europe also there is a differentiation. There is the updated specialized directive that foresees the difference of 50%. Now it's 63.7% difference, and there are recommendations to the European Commission of 2018 to make excise for HTPs same as the excise for cigarettes. So taking into account this picture, it seems like the international experience that it is not about comparing excises of normal cigarettes and HTPs. So what is the reason for Ukraine to be this driver of introducing something that is not introduced in the rest of the world? Thank you, Dmitro. We really do have various experiences of policies. There are exactly sizes of excise that are in many times more than cigarettes. We can talk only about the minimum rate, and the rest, which is not covered by the directive, it is at the discretion of the fiscal policy of the state. In our case, what we have, from the point of view of the economists, we have very little high-quality research that would show the elasticity of demand for HTPs. We have really few countries where they occupied a significant share of the market, and it's clear that they're not as interesting for the ones who actually are shaping the taxation policy. And it's important also is our personal Ukrainian experience. We have had the situation when the excises for HTPs were equal to excises to cigarettes, and this product kept rising dynamically. So we understand that the parity in prices with cigarettes did not limit the fifths of all smokers to come to HTPs. So if it turns out that they are less harmful for health, it's great. If there are some other risks which can only be seen at the long horizon, then the state would not stimulate this transfer with benefits and would not lose the income of the budget. So based on the fact that we are absolutely not yet at the top of the curve of Laffer, we still have the elementary issue of the capacity of law enforcement, and we have the experience of previous years when annual increases of excises would give the growth of tax revenues. It would be really surprising to refuse just going the tendency that we already have now. Also taking into account that a lot of international organizations, WHO, the World Bank, they set Ukraine as the example for other countries. So the policy which is very good for health and fills the budget. I'm not even talking that it's worth repeating the argumentation that we are actually in the conditions of war. And if we have to make a choice whether to tax tobacco or the income of all people who are working legally, then if we would have such a referendum, I think its results would be evident. That's what it seems to me. That's why the logic is such. Maybe somebody from colleagues from the panelists of the economic bloc, maybe Kristijan.
Yeah, Kristijan, you're also welcome to add to this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Yuri. So just a very quick contribution on my part as well with regards to the last question, and it was kind of a recurring theme in the discussion about how we're perhaps setting some unrealistic expectations of Ukraine, given the global trends. Ukraine would sort of be a pioneer if no preference is indeed given to HTPs. But then on the other hand, we know how difficult policy reform is, right? And how strong policy inertia can be. If there's anything that we have learned from the global kind of tobacco policy landscape over the last couple of years is that especially in turbulent macroeconomic times, the affordability of cigarettes can start increasing again so rapidly that we're now trying to basically, in even our most optimistic projections for many countries, the best we can hope for is to return to the levels before the huge inflation spikes that we've seen over the last couple of years. So since Ukraine has this opportunity now to debate policy change, and since the government, for very obvious socio-political reasons, is open to any interventions that would increase fiscal revenues, I think this is the right opportunity for comprehensive tax reform, which would also get the HTP preferential treatment or lack thereof correctly, even though many countries have not done so yet. And just as a final comment on some of the findings that we have from Montenegro, actually, not from our project, but there was some research that I was exposed to a couple of weeks ago, which showed that about a third of HTP consumers in Montenegro were also dual users. So just to echo once again the point that my colleague Hanna also made earlier, that there is no clear evidence of substitution between HTPs and traditional cigarette products. For many reasons, we can assume that very often actually they are complementary. Thank you.
Kristijan, thank you so much. And what you said would be the final words of our discussion, as we are running out of time. So first, in English, I would like to thank all of colleagues who joined from abroad and shared their views and expertise. Thank you very much for your time.
Many thanks to everybody who have been listening to us online and who have been present physically with us here. I think this discussion was quite interesting. I think you must have received something useful for you, and you have contributed to your better understanding what should be the optimum policy. Many thanks to the translator, how quickly and how much we have been talking. I apologize, I don't know him or her, that they have had a lot of work. So my respect to them. So many thanks also to our partners, to the Vienna Institute of International Research and the initiative of the Bloomberg Philanthropies. And this was the event about the taxation of tobacco by the Center of Economic Strategy. Together with you was Yuri Gaidai, the senior economist. Many thanks. See you next time at our events.